Jim Schaefer and Derek Sire.
Hey,
This
yo.
is the L3
L3
podcast.
podcast.
Hey, I like that. That was in sync.
I know, we did that on purpose. We did now.
Yeah.
We should do that a little
Sounds
bit more
good.
often.
So just to kind of catch everybody up where we are, last couple of episodes we had some unfortunate video issues where the video quality was not good. So
We're learning. We're growing.
We are learning and growing,
Yeah.
and we have changed some things up. And hopefully the video works for this. So if you are only hearing it on audio, that means something has gone horribly wrong.
It didn't work.
I pulled what was left of my hair out of my head. So, but hopefully this new setup will work well. So we apologize for the issues that we had with the video. We hope that not too many of you are disappointed. I know I wouldn't be, but
I wouldn't be.
in our last two episodes, we talked about It Takes Blank.
It Takes Blank. I think this is a really good series that we're in now because
It is a good series.
some people are trying to identify. They want to know what the magic equation, what's the magic potion for being a leader. And I wish I could give them like the top 5 leadership qualities. I wish I could give them the top 10, top 12, top 15. But I think there's so many things that come into play when you think about being a leader. The situations change, the group changes, the organization changes. And so you can't just like give you, here's a leadership packet and that goes everywhere.
Right.
Because you may not use all those tools at the same
Absolutely.
time. But the most important thing about being a leader is making sure you have those tools available
Mhm.
when you need them.
That's right.
Acquire as many tools as possible so that you can be the best leader for the best moment. And I think everything works out.
Absolutely. It's kind of like baby books, right? You can write a million baby books, but it's not all going to be about your baby,
Oh, come on now.
right? Same sort of thing. We can write leadership books all day long. We can podcast all day long. Your situation is going to be different than anybody else's situation.
That's
Even a different leader in the same situation you are in is going to have different challenges and different focuses.
It's true.
Cool.
People are different. They're going to be completely different than you are.
That's right.
So some of the things we talked about is it takes guts
It takes guts
to be a leader. You
have
got
to have
gotta-
courage.
You
yeah.
got to be strong. You got to stand up. You got to speak up. It takes guts. Second thing we said is that it takes grit.
grit.
It takes
Yep.
grit.
You got to
to
get
be a
dirty.
leader.
Get down in there and get her done.
Yeah. We talked about it takes diversity, and we believe that people have hijacked this word diversity and they've isolated the meaning to only race and culture. But diversity means so much more,
Absolutely.
especially when it comes to leadership. So in order to be a good leader, I think you have to be diverse, right? It
Diverse
takes,
set of skill sets. Yes.
I agree.
Mhm.
And we did its own episode on diversity.
Mhm.
And then the one before we talked about guts and grits. Today we want to continue. We planned on talking about it a little bit more, but I think the more we talk about it, the more we talk about it,
That's right.
right? And so today we have 5 more things that we think it takes to be a leader. Jim, you want to take the first one?
Sure, it takes flexibility. So this is kind of, if you think about it, this is kind of an offshoot from diversity.
Right.
Right. So diversity is having that wide set of skills that you have in your back pocket at any point in time. The flexibility component is being able to move from one to the other.
Right.
Right. So what are your thoughts on flexibility there?
Flexibility. Now, when I think about being flexible, I think about this concept of not being rigid. You know, sometimes I try to take the easiest approach to something, and when I try to think about what something is, I think about what it's not. So when I think about the opposite of being flexible is being rigid, kind of this in the box, hard, square corners, solid lines. And I think that those are the most frustrating moments to be in, when it's like, these are the rules, this is what we do, this is protocol. And I think being flexible as a leader allows you to kind of step inside and outside that box. It kind of allows you to step over the line, inside the line. The flexibility means that you got to think quick on your feet. You got to be able to adjust on a whim. I think flexibility is very important as a leader. What do you think about flexibility?
So one thing, just listening to you talk about that, one thing that came up to me was some of my early thoughts on leadership when I first started learning and getting into it was the difference between a leader and a manager.
Okay.
Right? Being a manager means doing things right.
Okay.
Being a leader means doing the right thing.
Okay. I like that.
So, management typically, if you think about, these positions that people get into where you get trained to make sure people do a certain thing at a certain time in a certain way, is it's textbook.
Yeah.
Right? It is by the book. It's
Right.
If you don't do this right here, this over here is not going to happen. And there's room for that in the workforce. I mean, especially if you're in anything that you're manufacturing or food. You know,
Right.
you have to keep food at certain degree temperatures, or you can make people sick.
Right.
But leadership is a step beyond that. So it's not just doing the right things. It's doing things the right way. You know, doing what is right, which is not always in the box.
Exactly.
You know, sometimes you have to make those concessions
Right.
for, you know, employees. So let's think about a manager who has an employee who is out of sick days.
Okay.
Okay, employee, they've had some problems at home, whatever their situation. They've had some problems at home,
Right.
and they need to take another day off because their kid is sick.
Right.
Well, the rule book says you can't do that.
That's what the rules say.
The rules in the HR manual may say you cannot do. They don't have any sick days. They can't take time off.
Right.
If they take another day off, you're going to have to let them go.
Right.
A manager may look at that and say, okay, well, if you take time off for your kid, you know, I'm sorry for you, but I'm required by guidelines,
Mm-hmm.
company guidelines, to terminate your employment. How devastating would that be?
That'd be
You know,
horrible.
your kid, and, you know, regardless of what the issue is. Now, you know, obviously you think about somebody who doesn't have sick days, and sometimes you have those people like, I got 8 hours off. I'm taking off because I don't want to be at work.
Right.
Okay. Those kind of people, okay, yeah, you may end up in the gonna let you go category because you didn't hold it smartly. But, you know, there's other people who have children, you know, multiple children especially.
Right.
Kids go to school, they get sick because other people bring their sick kids to school, and it spreads, right? And then they may not necessarily know their kid is sick. Sometimes
Right.
it's, you know, hiding and, you know, whatever.
Right.
But you've got a guy who, you know, a guy, girl, a parent,
Person.
who has a child who's sick. They're out of sick days, and they can't lose their job because they're the only income.
Right.
What do? A leader, a good leader, will work around to make sure that that person can be home with their child,
Right.
and really have compassion for their people, right? So you have to be able to be flexible
I think that's
in some cases.
huge. I think that's huge, and being able to know when to be flexible and when not to be flexible. I think that just as you were saying, you have some of those people that abuse the rules, they abuse the flexibility, they abuse the compassion, and oftentimes those people mess it up for everyone else. And I really, as a leader, I want to be flexible. I want to be able to give you that leniency. But the 5 people before you came with the same story. And,
Right.
and they abuse theirs, and you just happen to be the 6th one. And you know, I think it just comes with the time and experience, and knowing the people that work for you and the people that you work with. Just trying to make sure that that we're not so rigid as leaders. There's a difference between doing what's right and doing the right thing. I believe when I think of that, I think about this is what the rules say, but this is the heart of the rules. This is the intent of the rules, right? We talk about the intent of the law.
Right. What is the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law?
Exactly.
Yes.
And so I think when we think about flexibility, that's kind of what comes to mind. The next thing we talked about was it takes flexibility. We said that it takes spontaneity to do it.
Yeah. So just even an offshoot. So flexibility is an offshoot of diversity. Spontaneity is kind of an offshoot of flexibility. And to me, this actually goes more down the lines of worker morale.
Okay.
You may have a different take on it, but I think of, you know, being spontaneous is, you know, when I one time had a group of people that they were all in almost a bay of cubicles, and we were all on the same team. We were working really hard on a pretty big project, and it's just monotonous, right? You're just day in and day out. You come in and you bang out the computer, and you talk about things, you get things edited, and you get done with it, and just day after day after day, and I brought in rubber bands.
Yeah.
And when people walk through the door, I would shoot them with the rubber bands.
Welcome to work.
Right? And they're like, whoa, what? You know, and next thing you know, 5 minutes into work, we've got a rubber band war going.
Yeah.
You know, and everybody stops and we get busy. We do that for a few minutes. We get busy and we do our work. Well, when things start getting heated, you know, it's another thing too. Sometimes things get spirited at work, you know, when you guys are working together and you're trying to figure things out and you know, maybe some disagreement. You know, I'll shoot a rubber band at somebody who's getting a little hot-headed. You know? Well, next thing I know, employees are bringing in colored rubber bands.
Oh, wow.
Right, so they know who shot you.
Ooh.
Right, oh, that was a purple one. You know, that Derek hit me with that. You know, because you don't always see where it's coming. You just know, wham, bam, you just got hit in the head by.
I just got hit.
Yeah.
Well, whose rubber band is this?
Yeah. So, spontaneity, and it doesn't always have to be something that's, like that, but spontaneity is the ability to mix things up a little bit,
Right.
and to keep your day fresh.
Right.
Right. What do you think about that?
I think spontaneity is very important, especially in task-driven organizations or task-driven
Mhm.
groups. I think switching it up is very important. I even think about farming. After you plant an area for so long, they have to switch it up because the ground gets tired, right? They have to
You gotta use
rotate
up all
their
the
crops.
nutrients.
Yeah, yeah. I think about we had a hot tub in the back of our house, and the guy that was helping us maintain it, he said that we should drain our hot tub at least 3 times a year, 2-3 times a year, because the water just gets tired. Right, you keep trying to pour chemicals in it, and you clean it, you pour it in there and clean it, or after a while, he said, like, the water just gets tired, and so you drain the water, you put new water in, and that keeps the water fresh. It holds the chemicals more. So you think about
Interesting.
this concept of switching it up, of being spontaneous, and I think the very root of the word, or the very intent or meaning of the word, means unplanned. On a whim, right?
Yeah.
And so if you plan spontaneity, then it's not spontaneous.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? My wife and I do this all the time. I come home and I'm like, hey, babe, let's go on a date. And she's like, is it on the calendar? And I'm like, no, I was trying to be spontaneous. And she was like, well, can you put your spontaneity on the calendar? And I'm like, that defeats the purpose. Woman, help me.
Would you please Google spontaneity? Just right now, Google spontaneity. Let me know what that says.
But it's fun to see.
I'll be on the couch.
All right. It's fun to see managers and supervisors and leaders kind of be spontaneous. Like, I love getting that email that says, hey guys, your boss says you get to go to work, leave home at 12 today, right, on a Friday. Oh, I love those emails. It's like, hey guys, we got donuts at the front desk, right? Just a random email that's like, hey, at 5 o'clock today, go to the restaurant. Everybody's getting free popcorn. Like that's this freshness that's out of routine. I think it takes, the blank here is going to be spontaneity,
right,
in order to be an effective leader. So we talked about flexibility, spontaneity, which are kind of two in the same, but different. I think it takes both of those, a healthy chunk of both of those, in order to lead well.
Yes, absolutely.
What's number 3?
Number 3 is kind of getting back on the serious side, is risk. It takes risk.
Yeah.
So sometimes you can even say you have to risk being spontaneous.
Wow.
As a manager, if you haven't gotten prior approval from your boss, if you're just trying to be spontaneous, you don't want to put your spontaneity on the calendar with your boss, right? You can take a risk. It may be risky for you to do that,
right?
But your team will see that, and they will love you even more. Not just the fact that it was, spontaneous,
right,
but that it was not planned, or that it's something that really benefited them, that they enjoyed, whatever. But just
right,
the fact that your group may be the only one that got to do that, and they're like, wow, we got to do something special.
Right.
We got to do something special. Risk also is sometimes you have to put yourself on the line in order to fully lead your people the right way, to be flexible, to think outside the box, to do the right thing instead of doing things right, to do the right thing. You have to risk being different.
Right.
Right. You have to risk being different. And I think that's really important, because if you don't risk being different, then you will not be as an effective leader as you could be.
I agree. I completely agree. And part of that risk, I believe, is it shows your commitment to the team. It shows your commitment to individuals. When you make those decisions, or when you go on behalf of your group to represent them, and you say something bold, I think that's really important. When you take risk, when you make these these declarative statements, when you speak vision, when you're talking about direction, I think all of those require, when you set goals and expectations, quotas, I think there's an element of risk that comes with all those things.
Right.
Because on the back end of risk is failure. And if there's no failure on the back end, then how much of a risk is it?
Right.
Right. And
you have to be willing to fail.
You have to be willing to fail in order to make those great leaps. And so I'm reminded of a time that I walked to my boss's office and I was like, hey, I've done this work. And I think outside of the normal raise that that we're getting, I deserve something extra.
Mm-hmm.
And that boss went on my behalf to her supervisor, to her manager, to her director, and she submitted this request. She said, "Hey, this is what Derek is doing. He's done a great job," and she put herself on the line. I remember that. I didn't get the raise that I wanted, but more respect for her as a supervisor
Mm-hmm.
for making that risk, for taking
that
risk on
Yep.
my behalf.
Yep, absolutely.
So I think
That's good stuff.
that's beautiful. I also
Yeah.
think that sometimes risk can be planned, but I think risk can also be spontaneous.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? I think, once again, they all tie together when you think about what it takes to be a leader, because there are no hard lines between any of these.
Right.
When you think about communication, that can feed into spontaneity, can feed into flexibility, can feed into risk. When you think about energy and enthusiasm, which I think we'll get to those in the next episode,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very important to understand that how all of these tie together, and no one skill for a leader is isolated. It doesn't stand alone. They all tie together. So I think risk is a really big one that is underused,
Right.
undervalued.
Undervalued. Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. As a matter of fact, we may come back at some point in the near future and actually make that an episode in and of itself.
I agree.
Because you get into we mentioned failure, and you get into what is failure, and so many people try to avoid failure, but that's not necessarily what you want to do. You don't necessarily want to avoid failure, but you don't want to waste failure.
That's
Okay.
really good.
So let's put a pin in that one, right?
Oh my
and we can
gosh.
come back to and do another episode on that.
Yeah.
So number 4 is enthusiasm.
I jumped in that one a little bit. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Yeah, no. So when we started out this morning, it is still morning where we are when we
Right.
recorded. Sorry. So when we started out this morning, Derek had the giggles.
I did have the giggles.
He had the giggles,
I brought the giggles in with me.
and we've got probably 20 minutes of us just screwing up on video and on the audio. And it's great stuff. And I said, I think we're going to run with that
Yeah.
today, because you have to be enthusiastic. You have to be able to let yourself down, kind of back into risk, right?
Right.
Let your guard down a little bit and have some fun. Be enthusiastic about something. You don't have
agree.
to always be dancing around. Like sometimes you'll see Derek. He's doing this.
Oh
and,
yeah.
and you don't always have to be doing that, but you don't always have to not be doing that.
I agree.
You don't always have. So if your people see you able to let your hair down,
Mm-hmm. The metaphorical.
let your hair down a little bit, and enjoy something and
Right.
have a good time doing it. It doesn't have to be monotonous.
I agree.
How much would you think of a CEO of a Fortune 500 company that walked in up on stage, kind of dancing, maybe doing the Carlton, right?
Yeah.
Something just to break up the monotony.
Right.
Steve
Right.
Jobs was known as a straight-laced guy who was just, he was just crazy picky,
Mhm.
right? He was a stickler. Some people didn't like his leadership style because he was hard to work for. I
Yeah.
mean, he would tell you like it was. Well, who would have thought? What would people have reacted to if he had bounced up on stage instead of just
Wow.
walking out of the back, with his black shirt on
Yeah. The jeans and the turtleneck.
and the jeans? Yeah. What would people have thought if he'd put a little bit more energy into that?
Wow.
Think about that for just a minute.
I want to chime in on that just a little bit, because I think that we have to make sure that all of these things, it takes blank to be an effective leader. Those things look differently on different people.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking, as you're talking about Steve Jobs and the jeans and the slacks and the black turtleneck, how that was kind of his wardrobe. He was known for that.
Mm-hmm.
For Steve Jobs, risk, courage, spontaneity, flexibility, and enthusiasm would have all been tied into him wearing a white shirt.
Yes.
A white shirt.
A white shirt.
He wouldn't have changed anything about his approach to his presentation
Mm.
or his daily job. But at the moment that Steve gets out of his car in a white shirt, any kind of white shirt, didn't have to have rainbow unicorns on it. It could have been just a plain white shirt. People would have begin to talk. They would be in the chatter like, "Did you see Steve today? He had on a white shirt, not a black one, right? That takes courage. Oh, that's risk, right? That's enthusiasm. Like, oh, he's switching it up a
He's
little
so
bit.
spontaneous.
He's so spontaneous, right? It's
Right.
like
Yeah.
he's so flexible now. It's like you're thinking about something like that, simply changing a shirt, how it includes all those things as a leader,
Mm-hmm.
right? And for me, it may take something a little bit different. But I think about how we must understand where all these fall and how they fit us as a leader. If I change shirts, it doesn't mean anything because I wear a lot of different shirts.
Mm-hmm.
He changes shirts, it means everything.
That's a big deal, right?
So I think as leaders,
You walking up on stage without enthusiasm would be risky.
that would be risky. People are like, "What's going on? This is strange. What is he doing?"
Is he on drugs?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Lots of drugs. And so I think about all those different things and how they apply to us
Mm-hmm.
individually. How do we take these things and apply them individually? Because we look at people who we believe have the leadership characteristics that we want, and we try to mimic their behavior. And that's the worst thing we can do. The best thing we can do is be ourselves.
Be yourself. So let's talk about that for just a second. There's probably another episode in
Yeah.
that too. So one of the things that I teach people is to find somebody that you look up to
Mm-hmm.
and mimic their traits.
Mhm.
Learn their traits. Fake it till you make it.
Mhm.
Right. That doesn't mean change your hair.
Right.
That doesn't mean wear black turtlenecks to work every day.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean
Whatever.
whatever. It doesn't mean they're necessarily their personality traits unless their personality traits are specific to their leadership style.
Right.
Right. So that's the important part of that is to, it's good and recommended to let them mentor you, let them challenge you, let them inspire you with
Right.
their leadership traits. Craig Rochelle with Life Church, based out of here in the Oklahoma City area, he has a lot of good leadership skills that I want and that I learned. He's somebody that I look up to. I'm not going to wear the same clothes that he does.
Right.
I'm not going to do that, even though he dresses well.
Mm-hmm.
He looks different than I do,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you can't really mimic that,
Right.
Right? You don't want to do that, but you do want to take after their traits, the traits that they have. How good is he with people? How good is he on stage?
Right.
How good is he at writing material?
Right.
Those are things that I look at. Those are things I would like to get into. And so when we talk about, not copying somebody, that's not exactly what we mean.
Right.
Right.
We mean don't be that person.
Right. Don't be that person. You have to be you
Right.
and take the traits of the people that you admire and make them your own.
Because at the moment you start being someone else, that's very difficult to sustain.
Yeah, it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There are things that you look at someone, they do something good, they do something great, you value that, you can absorb that part of that characteristic, but trying to be them is probably the worst thing you can do. Coming to work early, regardless of who is doing it,
Mm-hmm.
you can adopt that.
Yes.
Right? If there's somebody that remembers names really well, and you're like, man, like I really want to remember names like that person, you can
Mhm.
adopt that quality, that
Aubrey
characteristic.
McClendon was really big about that.
He was really good about that.
Yeah.
He was phenomenal about
You know
that.
your name and your high school mascot.
My
that was his
gosh.
thing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But we think about what that looks like for us as individuals, for you all. What does it look like being enthusiastic? You don't have to be enthusiastic like me. You don't have to be enthusiastic like Jim, which are two completely different enthusiasts.
Mhm,
Right?
absolutely.
We don't have to be enthusiastic like Robin Williams or Kevin Hart or any of those
Mhm.
famous or big personalities. We have to find out what is enthusiasm for us and allow that to shine through, because it's going to shine the brightest when it's coming from our core.
Right.
All right, last one. What do we have?
That was it. Oh, stamina, number 5.
We got
is
stamina, number 5.
Yep, I ran out of stamina, and I'm like, okay, we're done, and we're not.
And it's a wrap. Stamina. As a leader, getting up every single day, putting one foot in front of the other, handling problem after problem, issue after issue, with person after person, project after project, it requires stamina.
It absolutely does. It absolutely does.
You got to be able to commit to it, see it through the end, and then start something else and do the exact same thing all over again. It requires stamina as a leader.
Right. So think about the guy that's in the meeting, right? You've always got, even if 2:00 in the afternoon, it's after lunch, it's kind
My
of that
gosh.
lull, right? Good leaders are not the ones that you'll see nodding off.
Wow.
Can't say I'm not guilty on occasion, but good leaders are not the ones that are nodding off consistently, especially.
Maybe once. Not consistent.
Yes. But you have to have stamina. You have to take care of yourself.
It's
You
true.
have to take care of your body.
So we're talking about physically. Yes.
Physically. You need to be able to keep your mind sharp
Right.
at any point.
Right.
There are tools out there on the interwebs that you can use to help keep your brain sharp and moving, and keep your skills going, and even increase them and make them better. And then, of course, you have to combine those all together, and you have to use those to keep up with the daily grind that your team is doing under your direction.
I agree.
Right.
So we think about physical stamina that allows you physically to be engaged. Talking about mental, I would even go into spiritual, emotional. We think about this intellectual. You can go into social, you can go into financial. I think whatever allows us to do what we want to do for the longest amount of time can be categorized, lumped under stamina.
Right.
And if we have great stamina, I think it allows us not only to do it longer, but to do it better while we're doing it.
Yes.
So stamina not only has to do with length, but quality as well. I know a lot of people that are doing a really bad job for a long time. I wouldn't qualify that as stamina.
Right.
Right. But when we're talking about a leader, it takes blank to be an effective leader. It takes stamina to be an effective leader, because we know you're going to hang in there. You're in there for the long haul, that you're committed to see this thing through the end. And I think that is a quality that is also overlooked, undervalued when we think about what it takes to be a leader.
Right.
So we talked about enthusiasm. We talked about stamina. We talked about flexibility. We talked about spontaneity. And we talked about risk. I think those are really good qualities. Of course, they're not the only ones. I think we're on like number 9 now, 10. I think we did.
I think maybe more than that.
Is it more than that? And we have another list that we're going to pick up on. But when you think about what it takes to be a leader, I think you can put in anything in these blanks, and you can probably justify it, right? I think when we're talking about guts and grit and gall and stamina and courage and enthusiasm, like all these things fit in the leadership belt buckle, the little, what is the tool belt? Tool belt. You got to have it in your tool belt. And you may not use them all the time. You may not ever use them, but when I need to use them, I want to have them there, right? I want to make sure that I know what risk looks like. I want to know what spontaneity looks like. I want to know what all those things look like. And I observe other people around me, and I find people that are doing it the way that I want to do it, and I put that in my belt, my tool belt, and I pull it up later. And I think it's just all these things that fit in this category are absolutely amazing. We're creating some really good lists. We want to hear some of the things that you all have on your list. Hopefully, we'll steal a couple of them and do a couple episodes on them.
Absolutely.
We love when our community gets involved, and they watch our episodes, and they give us feedback, and they let us know things that we didn't think about. Like, I love that about the L3 podcast community. Yep.
All right, folks. Well, that is it for today. I thank you all for watching and or listening, and we will see you next time on the L3 podcast.
See ya.
You've been listening to the L3 podcast with Jim and Derek. Join the conversation and be sure to follow the show on SoundCloud, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter at L3 Podcast. You can also visit us on the web at l3-podcast.com.